So tonight we'll talk about the duties, responsibilities for the role of the VP Finance Treasurer. There'll be some general accounting tips we have. We'll talk about the dues and fees, review that structure, review the due dates. We'll talk about chapter collections and some tips on collecting dues and fees from members and pledges, as well as looking at the invoices in credit memo sample statement that you will see from the Heritage Center. We'll talk about budgeting and review how to create your yearly chapter budget, and then touch a little bit on fundraising. And finally, we'll close out with just reviewing the chapter audit that gets performed every year. So the responsibilities for the position: you're leading the preparation of the budget annually for the chapter. You're coordinating budgets and reimbursements with your fellow officers and committee chairs, determining financial goals for your chapter. You make sure the chapter is adhering to, and as the treasurer, VP Finance, you are the one responsible for interpreting the budget, keeping accurate financial records, staying on top of fundraising and ensuring they're fulfilling their goal for the year. You enforce the collection of the dues and fees. You need to be utilizing both the chapter finance and audit manuals, which at the end of the presentation, there are links to those that I have for you. They're all on the AKSI community in the knowledge base. You're reviewing invoices and ensuring that the chapter is making its payments timely to the Heritage Center. And the last two things, December 31st, it's on your responsibility to help make sure that the chapter is no more than 60 days past due. And at the end of the fraternity's fiscal year, June 30th, the chapter needs to be at a current balance. So some general accounting tips while we wait for the screen sharing. There's a visual, so if we can't get the screen sharing, we'll make sure this presentation gets out to all of you afterwards. Plus, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to view it back later and hear anything you may miss. So if you're going to have a petty cash with the chapter, the tip is to generally have no more than $25 on hand. You want to maintain any deposit slips, and you want to be reconciling with the bank statements monthly if you have an account in a bank outside of university. I don't recall when I was in school if our university gave us statements monthly. Yours may not. You get statements from the Heritage Center monthly. Your ledger, you need to be posting at least monthly and balancing and closing it every month. I personally would recommend doing it more frequently than just once a month. Keep a sub-ledger for member accounts, and also keep a standard chartered accounts. So that's a breakdown of all the items within your budget. So you can have, member dues, fundraising fees, or expenses, rush expenses, those type of things in your standard chartered accounts. For checks, check requests, check payments require 2 signatures. I know when I was at school, that was a policy of the universities. I'm sure it's a policy a lot of universities have. Have a supporting invoice or voucher. And if it's a reimbursement, the payee cannot be one of the 2 people signing, even if they have authorization to sign. Invoices. Review and approve invoices in a timely fashion. On the invoice, write the check number, the payment date, and write those on the invoice. All right. We got the screen, so I'll get this show now.
Oh, he's got it.
Okay. Just 1 second. I got to do something with the, there we go. Make sure the Zoom chat's not covering my window. And then when you pay an invoice, mark paid on it, you can write it. You can go to any store that sells stationery things and find a stamp that says paid. So you can just stamp it paid. Record keeping, you are going to retain records for 3 to 6 years. This is for audit purposes. And you include all these records as part of your year-end audit. And then there's an IRS Form 990 that the Heritage Center will fill out. And when they do that, it will go into your folder on ChapterSpot and HQ Docs. So when they fill that out every year, it'll be uploaded. And if there's ever a need to look at it, you can go pull it. Heritage Center protocols. Payments are made by certified mail, return receipt, or paid via credit card through the Member Payment Center. We don't really allow past due amounts on accounts. So if a chapter is going to be in past due, we need to be having payment plans set up. We'll cover those in a little bit. And then following the accounting form for the Heritage Center. So while most of VP Finance treasurers tend to be accounting majors, there have been people in the position who aren't. So just some of my general accounting tips, if anyone is not a business or accounting finance major, for every credit, you have a corresponding debit. So everything always equals. Balance sheet equals, so assets equals liabilities plus equity. So just like our motto, everything, keep our accounts balanced. Reconcile any cash accounts monthly, record transactions immediately in your ledger, and always maintain that supporting documentation of all your transactions. Recommendations for segregation of duties. This is to help risk the chance of misappropriation of funds or fraud. It's while highly unlikely to happen, it has happened in the past, so we want to make sure we do everything to mitigate it. So one tip is breaking out the duties. Authorization, who has the authority to sign the checks? Not everyone needs that authority. Who's responsible for record keeping track of the books, and who maintains custody of those books? When you get an invoice, a statement, anything document related, reconcile it to your ledger, and always save the PDF copies of statements, your payment requests to the universities, and invoices in your ChapterSpot folders, and have them arranged by year. When you get to chapter audit time, that will help make things really easy. Everything's in one spot. You know where to go every time. Our dues and fees. So pledge fees, $48. Initiation fees, $84. Regular student member dues are $60. With the pandemic, those were cut to $54. And liability assurance, regularly $30 per member, currently at $27. A surety bond, this is a bond on you as the VP Finance Treasurer, $30 a year that is charged to the chapter. What this does, if you're not familiar with it, is it covers you in case that instance of fraud does happen with the chapter. And it ensures that the chapter in those instances gets any money they lose back. And the convention savings plan currently is $250. I believe starting the fall, it goes up to $350, Wendy?
Yes, that is correct.
Our due dates. The budget is due May 15th. You upload that with the chapter success plan. So as you start working on that, this is where your focus will be, is developing that budget, and we'll cover that in the budgeting section. Student member dues paid October 15th and February 15th, so the next payment's coming up. And that's the date that it should be paid to the Heritage Center, not the date that we're asking the university to cut the check. Convention savings plan, that gets paid on October and February 15th as well. Insurance is payable by October 15th. It is based on your March 1st roster. So the recommendation here is to make sure, in order that you have the money to pay it in the fall, you're collecting the money with your spring dues. That way you're not paying for people who may have graduated or may have not come back. They pay the money up front, you're covered. Pledge induction initiation fees, those are due within 7 days of the rituals. And the IRS Form 990 completed by the Heritage Center every year. So this is a sample invoice from that you would see from the Heritage Center. Invoices are mailed out to all chapter officers when they are issued. So if you don't see it, you can't find it. All your other officers in your e-board have them as well. So on this one, this is a PBLI registration for 56 people. So the chapter is being charged $5,544. A month before that invoice, there was a credit memo issued by the fraternity. So this was an overpayment or maybe a roster adjustment. So this one was on student member dues. So the chapter was credited $380 back. Both of these will show up on your statement, which is our next slide here. So if you see the first line here with the date of 10/1, that's the dues or the PBLI invoice we saw for the $5,544 that was applied and paid. So there's a $0 balance. Then another invoice comes out at the same time that you then get the credit for. But because the invoice for the $3,752 was paid, credits get applied to the oldest outstanding balance. So in this case, there was an invoice for $1,380. That $380 credit got applied to that invoice, so the chapter winds up with an ending balance of $1,000. If you ever have trouble understanding your invoices, credit memos, statements, you can call the Heritage Center to ask about it. You can email Deanna at aksci.org. Keep all your invoices, match every invoice number with the number from the chapter statement. Invoices statements, as I mentioned previously, are emailed to all chapter officers. And when it comes to roster adjustments, those are due by November 1st and March 1st. So as you're going through those invoices, be coordinating with your VP communications, secretary, or whoever is responsible for making those updates. And you always want to pay an invoice in full, then contact the Heritage Center about roster changes. We don't want you to ever short pay or wait to pay an invoice. It just leads to a mess because things get disjointed, confused. It's easier just to pay things up front and then let us sort it out through the process. And when it comes to paying for pledge fees and initiation fees, don't report the pledges or your new initiates without collecting their fees first. That way you have the money that's owed to the Heritage Center and everything can get paid at one time. And you're not being liable as a chapter for paying for anybody who hasn't paid. So how do we collect money that's owed to the chapter? When it comes to member dues, pledge fees, initiation fees, you can prepare invoices. This is where we come into that tip of having a sub-charter ledger of member accounts. So you have a sub-account for each member in the chapter, each pledge. They get an invoice with a due date. You send them prior to the start of the term. I would even recommend an early payment discount. So if your chapter charges, let's say $100, and we know we're paying 60 of that to the Heritage Center, maybe give them a $5 or $10 discount to incentivize them paying early. You can ask them to sign a promissory note, ensuring that they understand and agree that, yes, I owe this money to the chapter. I will pay it by this time. And any member that's having financial difficulties, you can always arrange a payment plan. And with those payment plans, you can consider an interest charge. We have an interest charge on our accounts. So if you are behind with the Heritage Center on payments, you do get charged an interest fee. And if the chapter is having financial difficulty, you can get on a payment plan with the Heritage Center. They're approved by the Heritage Center. And you can contact Deanna and Melinda Both their emails are here listed. They can help you get that arranged, get it set up, get it approved. And if you do need to request one of those, we ask that you copy your chapter advisor, your section director, and Wendy on the email. So roster updates. Again, roster updates are due by November 1st and March 1st in order to receive credit back. So who are we updating the roster for? Well, you have your graduates, your suspensions, anyone on a leave of absence that's been approved, resigned members, members no longer enrolled at the university, or maybe members who transfer to another university. In the case of the transferrings, there is a policy and a procedure we can go through of getting them reported to get them transferred so the correct chapter gets invoiced in the future for them. And again, coordinate with whoever is responsible for maintaining and updating the chapter roster. And this is where reviewing that dues invoice comes into play. If you know you have 12 active people in your chapter and you get invoiced for 20, most likely the roster hasn't been updated, so you need to get that done. And again, pay the invoice first, then let the credits come back to offset any other balances, and things will work out in the end. So now we get into your biggest responsibility as a treasurer and VP finance, and that's doing the budget. Why do we budget? It provides visibility of financial management. It's a great tool for tracking our costs. It helps us identify risk of overspending. It helps balance your spending across different efforts and initiatives. It provides a blueprint for the person who will be doing this position after you move on. And in reviewing budgets, reviewing historical actuals, it helps to highlight areas where maybe we need to improve. So if we consistently see we're overspending on recruitment, well, we probably need to start allocating more budget to that every year. Helps project spending and income over the course of the year, and it allows for cost cutting. So the big thing to look at there is maybe there's something we can buy in bulk now and have one expense that's larger in 1 year, but guess what? We're going to save twice that over the next number of years because we don't have to keep buying it. Something like, tea candles for initiation. Buy a bag of like 1,000 and you don't have to worry about it for a while. When you go to create the budget, you're creating the budget for the entire academic year as part of doing the chapter success plan. So you want to start by creating it for the entire year and then breaking it down to your semester or quarter based on the terms your university has. You want to review historical actuals as a basis for developing the next year's budget. Or a couple of different examples, zero-based budgeting. We do this at my job. So essentially, everyone starts at zero. Your officers and committee heads are providing you with what they need for a budget, and they have to justify what that budget is going to be used for in order to get it. The historical actuals, that's looking at your actuals from previous years and using that as a basis for developing your budget. So recruitment, let's say we spent $300 over the year. So we know we could budget at least $300, and then maybe you add, $20, $30 to it, accounting for possible inflation. You always want to be realistic in developing the budget, never project a loss. Any expenses that are unauthorized and are over $50 need to be reviewed and voted on by the e-board. And you want to review all budget variances. So this is reviewing variances over a certain amount or percentage. So like where at my job, this is something we do all the time. It's actually a lot of what my job is. And so there's thresholds. So for a chapter, you could say anything over that $50 mark or anything that's overspent, underspent by 10%. You also want to establish financial policies and procedures. And these aren't things that need to go into the bylaws, but these are things that the e-board could create as a chapter statement of policy. If you aren't familiar with what that is, it's similar to the board of directors statement of policy, where that is how the board operates the fraternity in between the meetings of chapter Congress. A chapter statement of policy is how the e-board is operating between chapter meetings. So in those procedures, you can have travel reimbursement. What is the expectation of members to get reimbursed by the chapter for traveling to PBLI or convention? What's the approval policy for expenditures? And what's the policy for getting reimbursed? If a member goes out and spends their own money on recruitment items, what do they need to do, to get reimbursed for that cost? Provide invoices or receipts, however you set it up. What gets caught or accounted for in the budget? You have your inflows, you have your outflows. Your inflows are things like your chapter dues, your pledge fees, initiation fees, fundraising, and one item that I think a lot of chapters seem to not think of initially when they're putting together budgets: school funding. Do you get things from your Greek life organization? Are chapters that are where the universities don't have Greek life? Do you have money from clubs and organizations? Can you submit requests to other departments for funding? I know Kappa Xi years ago got all of their PBLI trip paid for because they went to the provost's office, they went to the dean's office, and just got all this funding to help pay for some of these things. Then you have your outflows, which are your fees payable to the Heritage Center, insurance, convention savings plan, your chapter events, pledge education, and then other fees and things that may be encountered during the year. So to help you with developing the budget, in the general resources folder on HQ Docs and Chapter Spot, there is this nifty little budgeting worksheet that you can use. Really good worksheet. You can add lines to it if there's things here that you need to add that aren't included. But one of the nice things is you can just start typing in. You can keep track of your actuals, keep track of the future budgets, and so you have everything in one document, so it's easily reviewed and easily created for the next year. And as you figure out your revenues, which are your inflows, you can start figuring out the expenses. Convention savings plan was already preloaded into the worksheet for you, so you know what the schedule is for that. And then at the wrong button. At the very bottom is your forecasted profit loss. So pitfalls to avoid when developing your budgets: don't do everything yourself. Any officer or committee chair that is responsible for a line item in your budget needs to be the one giving you that estimate. Don't overly depend on fundraising. We all know how fundraising goes. A budget that is dependent on fundraising is doomed to fail. I know this from doing budgeting at my church. This is what we call our faith budget. So it's that shortfall between what we know we have and what we hope everyone's going to give us. Not a good way to do a budget. Hold your officers, hold your committee heads accountable for over-under runs. If recruitment says they're going to spend $200 and they only spend $50, you want to know what happened and why they didn't spend as much as they thought. Because that's money that could get used elsewhere. And if they spend more than what they said, what happened that caused them to spend more? The Brotherhood always needs to know where the budget stands. So this comes into part of the campaign of having that treasurer's report in the minutes filled out. So make sure that is filled out for every meeting and part of the meeting minutes. You're providing the information that goes into that weekly or biweekly, however frequently you have your chapter meetings, to your VP Communications Secretary. And even if it hasn't changed, provide a report at every meeting on where the budget stands. You have that treasurer's report. That's all you really need to review. And if there's any variances, that's where you can bring them up and have a discussion about them. And another, as a reminder again, I mentioned this earlier, but unforeseen expenses. The biggest unforeseen expense chapters have that really isn't unforeseen is our insurance payment. We think of, okay, insurance is due in the fall, so we don't always think to collect those fees in the spring. So I will just keep on repeating it, collect it in the spring, so you have the money ready to pay in the fall. Once you have the budget prepared, you need to present it at the first available chapter meeting. The chapter needs time to review it, ask questions, and then they vote and approve the budget, and that vote gets recorded as part of the minutes. You make sure it's uploaded with the chapter success plan for the May 15th due date. And it is okay. You know, we said don't project a loss. Sometimes it does happen. It's unavoidable. You can cut as much as you can, and sometimes it's just not enough. So if you have to project a deficit, you just can't be doing it on a yearly basis. That is not a healthy path for a chapter to be following. Track your revenues and your expenses by budget category. So as much as you want to break down the budget into individual areas, do it. Track each one. Address those over-underruns timely. That means the first good opportunity, don't wait till the end of the term when there's no money left. Because if you know where your money is earlier, you have those underruns, you can use that money to help offset the overruns. And at a regular basis, a minimum at the end of every term, I would say do it more frequently. Review those budget versus actuals with the chapter at one of your chapter meetings. So now we'll move on into fundraising. Never budget your never balance your budget with the dependence on fundraising. Fundraising is really a tool for completing specific goals. Goals like chapter merch, funding spring banquet, traveling to fraternity events. And one way you can help with fundraising is by adding a fundraising element to events that are already planned. So once this pandemic's over and we can start being all in person again and having those gatherings we miss having, get back to planning spring banquet, do a silent auction. Great time to do fundraising. Fundraising is also to help us budget for the future. If there's an event we want to do, create a special account in your budget for it. Document the purpose and the procedure for the project goal, and then you start fundraising to help fund that project. And you deposit a predetermined amount of money each term into that account. And it's an account that you keep segregated from the rest of the general budget, so you're not tempted to touch it and use it on something else. And always report the balance of that on a regular basis. So example for this, a few years ago, Edify had their 50th anniversary. This was one of those times of doing a special account so they could budget for paying for that celebration. These are some ideas for doing virtual fundraising during this time. I have to give credit to one of our alumni in Area 3 for doing this. I found this in a presentation he provided, and I liked it, so I just recreated it for us. So selling chapter merch. This is a way to challenge your artistic members, even to get, if someone's not having fun right now with AK Psi just because of how things are going, this is a chance to get those type of people involved. So challenge those artistic members to come up with designs that are both AK Psi and non-AK Psi related. It's similar to doing work at a concession stand, and it's great for alumni relations. So you take those designs, make some t-shirts, make some, have them printed in cups, whatever, sell the merch. AK Site Cookbook. Ask members from your chapter, from other chapter, your alumni, to share some of their favorite recipes, put them together, and sell a cookbook. Just like doing a bake sale, except you don't get to take home the goods. You have to make it yourself still, but hey. Great way for doing alumni relations and brotherhood. Corporate sponsorships. Even virtually, we can still help our corporate sponsors promote their products and services in exchange for sponsorships. Another great way for doing alumni relations. One that I had never thought of, and probably the reason why I decided I should put this in this presentation, an Amazon wish list for your recruiting needs. So find those things on Amazon you will help with recruitment. Create the wish list and ask your alumni for help buying those materials through Amazon. You could do a virtual silent auction. My company does this for United Way, and we're just kicking off this campaign right now. So we set up on our intranet a website. Everything that's in the silent auction is listed there. And then each one is tied to an Excel spreadsheet that you can go in and place bids on. The hardest thing with putting this together is just putting the packages or baskets, whatever is in the auction, together. The rest of it's fairly easy to do. Great way for doing alumni relations and doing community service. And the last one, doing a virtual dance party. So host a virtual party for your student body, just like doing a concert, and it's a great brotherhood event. So now I'm going to suck all the fun out of it. And we're going to talk about the chapter audit. So the audit is actually performed by the incoming officer. So you being currently in the position, you're not the one in charge of doing the audit. This is kind of that segregation of duties we talked about earlier. You could help take part in it, but the incoming treasurer, VP Finance, should be the one running it. You want to have 4 to 5 members on the audit committee who have accounting experience, and you can include others from outside of your chapter. Ask local CPAs, ask your alumni who might be a CPA, ask your professors. One of the recommendations from the audit manual is at least one person should have a CPA. You're going to review all the financial records. This is why you are keeping 3 to 6 years worth of documentation. You're going through all these records looking for discrepancies or possible instances of fraud. A lot of times this is just a check the box, making sure things are in order, that all your ledgers and everything are balanced, and just really determining where the chapter stands financially. So on your documentation, as mentioned, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 6 years. Some requirements I know are at my job, our record retention for some things is 7 years. And for other things, you know, I work at a nuclear plant, it's end of life for a lot of other documentation. All that documentation on your income and expenses, so your invoices, your payments, and keeping everything in chapter spots so it's centrally located and easy to access. IRS information, this is a big one that people tend not to really think about a lot. And this goes back to corporate sponsorships and donations to the chapter in general. Your chapter specifically is a 501c7. What that means is that if a corporation, an alumni, donates directly to the chapter and that money goes into your chapter account with the university or local bank, wherever your money's held, that donation is not tax deductible. If the money goes through the AK Psi Foundation, which is our 501c3 branch of the fraternity, then the donations are tax deductible. And so the sponsor student campaign that we're doing right now with the websites and getting your alumni to donate, those are the tax deductible donations because those are going through the foundation. Your chapter designated funds, chapter endowments, all of those donations are tax deductible because they go through the foundation. So that is it for this presentation. Resources for you: the Treasurer Curriculum Roadmap, and all of these resources are available through the knowledge base in the AKSI community. The roadmap is a great little tool. It guides you through what trainings are out there for you, what you should be focusing on each month as we go through the course of the year. The finance manual, great information on our policies and procedures related to finance and the fraternity and operation of your chapter. The audit manual, which will help walk you through the audit process for the chapter audit, and then the operations plan for the fraternity. So I will stop sharing. And yeah, we'll open it up for questions or discussion now.
I had a question about the chapter designated fund. I was curious, how would you recommend allocating, like if we have extra funds to the chapter designated fund versus just keeping that in a savings account and letting that accrue some interest there?
So you would want to contact Jessica Sykes, jessica@aksci.org. She's the managing director for the foundation for us, and she can work with you on getting that done. She can go into a lot of detail on all that, so you can start growing that interest and get it endowed, so you do have it available for doing scholarships and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So my chapter is located in Canada. So I was wondering if we have to worry about the IRS stuff for the audit.
That is a good question. Do you have an idea, Wendy? Because I haven't dealt with Canadian chapters in years, and I don't remember now.
No, you don't have to do anything with the IRS as far as having an EIN number or anything like that. Nope, doesn't apply to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You said that the incoming VP of Finance does the audit. What if I am also going to be like the incoming VP of Finance? So then who would do it?
I would probably recommend, if there's another accounting major willing to help lead it, have them do it, just so you have that separation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I just want to give another pitch for the sponsor as student program that Scott talked about. We do have 4 chapters: Gonzaga, Oregon State, Eastern Washington, and the University of Washington, that already are in the midst of this program. This is a direct way for you to fundraise. It is a benefit to anyone who donates, because that you are giving to the foundation, making it tax deductible, but those funds are going to go directly back to the chapter and a credit to your account. I know Oregon State at this stage of the game has already raised $350, I think it is. And literally all they've done is have a campaign manager and send in 7 pictures. The Heritage Center did all the rest of the work. They created a classy page. They created an email that gets sent out to all the alumni. And it doesn't have to be alumni that donate either. It could be parents or friends or things like that. It could go directly to an individual student. So if your parents, for instance, want to make a donation to your chapter to help you personally, they can do that. And then it makes that donation tax deductible. So I just want to, like I said, put that pitch in there again for how simple this is, how easy this is. And the hardest part of it is to make sure that you follow up with the people that do make the donation, because if you do not say thank you to them, they will not give again.
I really appreciated on the slideshow some of those different potential virtual fundraising ideas. I was curious, just asking anyone on the call if anyone has had any success, or if they can speak to any success during the fall for fundraising, and kind of how you implemented that. Was it, just using people in your chapter, or how did that go? Because I can speak to my chapter, at least. We've been having a real difficult time so far. So if anyone has any, earth-shattering ideas, I'd love to hear them.
I can say for our chapter, we haven't done a fundraiser in the fall because we didn't really know what to do. We thought about possibly doing a virtual auction, but it just kind of became a little bit too complicated for some of our members in our fundraising chair, then kind of quit halfway through. So it was just kind of a mess. And so we ended up not doing anything in the fall, and we're still kind of brainstorming for the spring.
Hello. So I can kind of speak on the behalf of my chapter. So, of course, we've been online ever since the beginning of COVID. So what we did also in the spring, this is when COVID just started. So for the spring of last year, what we did was we sort of did an auction. However, what we did instead was, given that some of us are even outside of the United States, what we decided to do was sort of allow the other brothers in the chapter to fundraise or even auction some of their products or services. So for example, one of the brothers who's a photographer actually pitched an auction to sell their own, I guess, what do you call it, bundles. So for example, I would I would place an auction of $2 or something like that. And then I would state, I want this item. And then it's sort of like a raffle, basically. So it's actually worked out pretty well, considering that some products, such as, I know this one person wanted to sell, for example, one of his albums or something like that. So what we do is we would use a Venmo account and drop in, say, $20 for this album. So the person who dropped $20 is most likely to win the product. So I see that with the accumulation of the funds with the raffle, I find it to be very significantly helpful. However, you kind of do need that contribution from the brothers. So if you can really get that idea across, I think that would be pretty efficient for fundraising.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Annie.
And something I just saw come across from Beta Lambda is they're getting ready to do a virtual cancer walk. So they have a flyer and everything that's ready to go. It'll go out. There's a Venmo or a couple different payment options where people could do their sponsorships based on, okay, I'll pledge for this however many miles, and then they'll go do the walk. And then based on however many miles they did, then people will pay. And if you do something like that, I would recommend on the flyer saying this is, they're doing it for the American Cancer Society, but just on your flyers, if you do it, specify that these proceeds are going to, this organization.
Well, and one thing I would add too is that, you don't have to have 30 items in an auction. 2, 1 even, so that it's not overwhelming. So that because we're all living through this virtual environment that we're really not sure that things are going to work, start with 1 item to maybe like Darren was saying, maybe some member does photography. So they could sell, you could put up for auction a senior graduation session. So you just put up one item. And then if that goes well, then you could try a couple of other items, and just, start small, see how it goes. And then you would not have had, you would have one small success as opposed to maybe 20 big failures. So that's just a suggestion. Small is a good word to start. It's a good place to start.
I could say from seeing the things coming out for our United Way auction, movie baskets are very popular right now. Popcorn bowls, gift card to like Redbox, if those even exist. I don't know if they do. So we got about still 10 minutes. Any other questions or anything anyone's just wanting to know? I mean, doesn't necessarily have to be related to the topic, but if it'll help you with, being successful in AK Psi.
I came a little bit late, so I'm not sure, I might have missed the information, but I liked what you were talking about, having like the treasurer report. Is that like a quarterly? Would you recommend that being quarterly every single chapter, or more specifically when we are going to create a new budget, then getting that approved? Maybe those are two different things. The actual report for the chapter and then actually getting that approved is different. I think you're muted.
There. Kept on hitting my start button over the mute button. So they're two different things. The treasurer's report is done every chapter meeting. And if you look at your chapter meeting minutes, there's a box that has the information that you would report on. So that's what I'm talking about, reporting every chapter meeting, just kind of that standpoint of here's the budget, here's where we're at. And then when you present the budget for the next year after it's prepared, that's a separate thing, so a separate report that you can do at that time, or do it as part of new business, and then have the chapter vote on it. And I would even say make sure the chapter has the budget before that meeting where it's going to be voted on.
So I would say if there's nothing else, I personally want to say thank you to Scott for creating and presenting the materials. I know as volunteers, we answer the same questions over and over every year, in particular about the insurance. So I was glad there was a lot of emphasis put on that particular aspect of the budgeting. Again, thanks very much, Scott. If you guys ever have questions, you have chapter advisor, section director, myself, there are always resources to go to answer any questions that you might have, provide any input, offer any assistance in any way. Don't ever feel like you are just out there by yourself, because that is simply not the case. So I'm going to thank everyone for coming. Don't forget about the treasurer campaign. Your opportunity to win that set of Alpha Kappa Psi block letters, as long as and you're already partway there because you've attended the training, and we'll see how the rest of the other requirements go. I would love to be able to give out a lot of those sets of letters. So again, thank you very much for attending, and we'll give you a few minutes extra back on your evening.